Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire so that you can advocate for liberty no matter where you live. I am Melissa Blasek. I'm a former New Hampshire state representative and the current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots liberty organization called Rebuild NH. Today, I'm going to give a little story about a bill that I helped kill this year now for the second time. And we are going to talk to the infectious, vivacious Carla Gericke of the Free State Project. If you don't know what the Free State Project is, it is a grassroots project here in New Hampshire that is specific to New Hampshire about concentrating libertarians in the New Hampshire, into New Hampshire to keep New Hampshire the true live free or die state. And so today I want to talk a little bit about the power of numbers. Having a lot of people behind you absolutely will help with your activism efforts. But before I get into that, just a quick word from our sponsors. Let's be real, losing weight isn't just about looking good. It's about taking back control of your overall health. 42% of adults in America are classified as obese. Obesity is directly linked to severe health issues, including heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and cancer. These illnesses are costing Americans over $173 billion each year in medical expenses alone. If you've tried diets and different workouts with no success, it's not your fault. Big Food and Big Pharma have rigged the system against you by contradicting information, leaving you confused. But there's good news. The wellness company just launched Drop, a GLP-1 peptide oral drop formula developed by their chief medical board, specifically designed to support your metabolism, curb cravings, and help you shed weight. That's right, no injections or the risk of severe side effects we are seeing in the Zempic. Simply take Drop in water, gradually increase in quantity over time, and let your body do the rest. Start your weight loss journey today and get $50 off plus free shipping. Head to dailyclouthealth.com and use code dailyclout. Take action today for a healthier tomorrow. So I have been working to kill a bill. This year it was HB 553. Last year it was a bill that was a Senate bill. And both times I like to call them the anti-parent bill because it practically makes basic parenting illegal. And what they're trying to do is add to child abuse statutes all these unmeasurable benchmarks of harm that are completely and totally subjective, like emotional and psychological abuse. And I'm not saying that emotional and psychological abuse are not real, but they're unmeasurable. And family court, as it is a place where you are guilty until proven innocent, and not the other way around. And there is not the same benchmark for proof against you as it is in criminal court. So I just can't support getting behind adding anything that can't be, where you can't take a measuring stick up to it and say, this is abuse and this is not abuse. This year's bill, on top of that, they wanted to add in something called parentification as abuse. Now, you might be sitting there and wondering, what in the world is parentification? Well, I actually probably wouldn't have even known what it was, except that I've read about it in a few books, and it is a new, completely made up therapy word. Meaning, if you give your child too much responsibility at whatever, I guess somebody, again, a completely subjective person would consider to be not age appropriate, then you are parentifying them. Now, again, no way of measuring this. So you're telling me that if I had my 10-year-old pack lunch for my 5-year-old, is that parentification? Is that abuse? Well, kind of according to this bill. It was wild. It was wild. So what I'm going to tell you the steps that I went through to try to kill this bill. Last year, House had a very narrow majority. Okay, Republicans and Democrats were practically even. Republicans were not up in the room when that bill came through. It passed the Senate, came in through the House. It passed again, but it was amended, meaning it had to go to committee of conference, We're both, some members of the House, some members of the Senate have to sit down together. House leadership was on my side about this bill. They did not like this bill. So they sent like the most hardcore person ever to the committee of conference, and he basically got it totally neutered. Great. This year it gets brought back in a House bill. And of course, I have my people email the committee, oppose it. I call members of the committee, oppose it. I called House leadership, and they read the bill and were horrified and told the committee in no uncertain terms, this bill needs to die. Well, guess what? They passed the bill, came to the floor. Now what do I do? Well, last year I was sort of out there screaming into the abyss alone. This year I was like, okay, I need backup. And this is my point where I'm saying strength in numbers. I got every single group to line up opposing this bill. There are a bunch of little small grassroots organizations here in New Hampshire, but it does not mean that they don't have power. They do have power. They have lists. They have people who pay attention to them, and therefore they have power in the eyes of the politician. So we all worked together, and we put out all the stuff against it. We wrote op-eds against it. We created a ton of noise, all working together against the bill. So much that it really worked its way all the way up to the speaker's office, and leadership worked to kill this bill. Ultimately, the bill failed. Well, it was tabled, but it was up against a deadline, so it was functionally killed by all but one vote. Remember, we have a 400-person House. Every person voted to kill this bill, except for one person, meaning all of the sponsors even voted to kill their own bill. I hope that the sponsors have learned a lesson. I fear that they have not, and that they'll come up with some weird excuses in their head about how there was some technical reason, and they'll come up with a better version next year. So I might have to do this again next year. We'll see. But that is the power of strength in numbers. Get to know the other groups. Even if you're just an individual activist, make friends with the other groups, because it was so much easier this year to kill that bill than it was last year. With all of us working together, we could just create so much more noise. There were texts going out to different districts, texts going out to the politicians. Like I said, op-eds, letters to the editor, everything created all this noise around this bill. And that's really how it worked. I want to say there was like, oh gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different groups all working together to kill that bill. And that is what it took to have it die. Only one person voting against to kill it. All right, we are going to bring on Carla Gericke, who is going to talk more about actually some of these liberty groups and how they came about and that sort of thing. Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, Carla Gericke of the Free State Project. Good to see you, Carla.
Great to see you. I always love seeing your smiling face.
Well, you have an infectious energy, and I feel like anybody who's involved in the, liberty community probably does know you, but if they don't, they should. So I wanted to have you on. I think you're such a fascinating person, and as a person, and I want to talk about the Free State Project. Sort of the theme of this show is strength in numbers. And so, we talk about it in a slightly different way at the beginning of my show, but having you on to talk about this concept of concentrating power. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you immigrate to the United States?
So I won a green card in the lottery. People are often shocked to learn there is a green card lottery in America. And I won that back in 94 when I was in law school in South Africa. And then, of course, the process takes some time. I had to finish law school and marry my then boyfriend, now husband of 30 years. And so we ended up immigrating in 96. We spent a good chunk of time in Silicon Valley, me as an in-house counsel. I worked for companies like Logitech and Apple Computer. Actually, like my first official job was at Apple, when no one wanted to work there because Steve Jobs had left. And I actually worked on the acquisition of Next to bring Steve Jobs back to Apple. We then went through the bust that was, right after Y2K when the bubble burst. And that's actually where I kind of started to explore monetary policy. What happened? Why did this bubble burst? We were living high on the hog. I was a lawyer. My husband was an engineer. He had just had a VC round, first round funding of like over $6 million for his business. And then everything just went to hell in a handbasket. And I ended up having to lay off over 1,200 people, including myself. His company folded. So we put everything we owned in storage and actually went backpacking for what was going to be just 12 months, but turned into almost 3 years. We were on a budget of $15 a day, and you could still do that in Southeast Asia and India at the time. Came back to the States, ended up in New York City. This was just post 9/11. The vibe in the country had really changed. I actually went back to school and got my master's degree in fine arts. So, I'm a lawyer, but I'm also kind of artsy, as you can see back here. And then somewhere in that, around 2003, I learned about the Free State Project. And I was just like, this is a really neat idea. Let's start exploring it. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, I'm always so fascinated this idea of moving for liberty.
Right.
Do you think, so when you came to the United States, did you already consider yourself somewhat libertarian?
Excuse me. Sorry about that. The allergy season has started. Did I consider myself a libertarian? Great question. Journalists always ask me that. This is the way I answer. I was definitely born a rebel, but I also believe we're all born free, right? Because what is the alternative? So in some ways, I feel like we're actually all born libertarian. And then a lot of that gets trained out of us or taught out of us or, indoctrinated out of us. So I didn't have a name for it, but I was always kind of beating to my own little drum that perhaps was a tune only I could hear. But where I first heard the term was actually in San Francisco. My husband's business partner, he grew up in the East Bay. And I remember it was Thanksgiving and we were hanging out with the family and we were arguing about abortion. And he was raised by a single mom and he was actually pro-life. And that surprised me. And he was like, I was like, oh, what are you, a Republican now? And he said, no, I'm a libertarian. And I'm the kind of person, if I hear something and I don't know what it is, I'm going to go find out. And so I was like, what is that? So yes and no.
Right. So, moving for liberty is just such an interesting concept to me. And obviously that's what the entire idea behind the Free State Project is. So what appealed to you personally enough to uproot your life and move to another state? I mean, I'm born and raised in New Hampshire. So this is not a concept that's necessarily familiar to me personally, but what was appealing enough for you to do something like that?
So what appealed to me was the movement, right? Sort of the concentration strategy and this notion of being together with like-minded people. But honestly, I fell in love with New Hampshire. I really love it here. Like it just, the winters, I wouldn't mind going away for a month a year. But we're in spring now, so I have nothing to complain about. But I fell in love with New Hampshire. It really, the live free or die spirit is really alive here. I believe, forest bathing is a real thing. And if you care about your health, we should be able to walk outdoors and really appreciate the splendor. It's a beautiful state. It's very safe. So we started exploring it from New York when we learned about the Free State Project. I will also say, for me personally, I never regarded geography as destiny per se. So my dad was a diplomat and my mom worked for the Foreign Service in the press department. She was kind of a minister of propaganda, if we have to give it a name. And so I traveled a lot, even as a child. I had a very, disjointed childhood in many different countries. But when we decided we were going to move to America with the green card, I mean, that's a huge decision too.
Yes.
So in some ways, I feel like maybe my heritage, my genetics or something. Obviously, we're a bunch of stroppy people because first they left Europe and got on a boat and sailed to Africa. Then I left Africa and got on a plane and flew to Silicon Valley, then to New York, and then to here. But for me, New Hampshire is my forever home. I love it here. I love the house I live in. I love my community. It's just, it's a good place to make a stand if one must.
I always say it's pretty much the last place to really make a stand. At the end of the day, it probably will be. But so let's talk a little bit for those who don't understand what the Free State Project is. Can you talk about its inception?
So the Free State Project, as a concept, is a concentration strategy. We've been around for just over 20 years. So it's not new. It's in its second generation, but even that is exciting because that means we get to do it all over again. I was talking to someone the other day that said over the winter, there were 6 porcupets that were born. So what is a porcupet? It is a baby porcupine. The porcupine is the logo of the Libertarian Party, but they actually stole it from the Free State Project. And of course, the porcupine is a peaceful creature, but it is defensive and you don't want to mess with it. So about 20 years ago, Jason Sorens, the founder of the Free State Project, wrote an essay. He was a grad student at Yale at the time, and he sort of posited, and this was like early days of the internet. We forget, right? Like it's like the kids these days with their GPS and, but it was the early days of the internet, and it created quite a bubble. So he posted this thing and he said, okay, libertarians keep losing everywhere. What would happen? And instead of us being dispersed all over America or even the world, what if we all concentrated in one place and we really tried to use it as an example to show people these ideas work, right? Because the resistance is there because people are scared of change, but people are also not as well, I wanted to say as irrational as we think, but we both went through COVID mania, so perhaps that statement is not true. But I do believe if you can show people prosperity and show people the path to more economic freedom does lead to more happiness for everyone, then people will adopt those ideas. So it's kind of a concentration strategy to become this beacon of light or this example to show other people, hey, if you replicate this where you are. And I do think there's a trend towards decentralization. So we're early, but I actually think we're early on an idea that might work for people in different geographic areas with different needs and values. Why not?
I'm a big believer in, well, of course, the idea of federalism, but people should live where it makes them happy. So let blue states be blue, let red states be red, let New Hampshire be the freest state, and let people live there who are happiest there. And I think the fundamental misnomer that I hear amongst New Hampshire natives like myself about the Free State Project is that they believe that this is a group of libertarians who are coming here to take over and change the state. New Hampshire was chosen by the Free State Project for a very specific reason. It wasn't because it was a state that could be easy for them to come and take over and radically change. It was because it was already one of the most free libertarian leaning states. And as a New Hampshire native, I have always viewed free staters as being reinforcements, right? The state has always been the live free or die state. I mean, I think we have the most famous state motto in the country, right? And we have always had that very libertarian leaning streak, particularly in the Republican Party, but even just across, I would say, the entire political spectrum. but we were sort of starting to lose ourselves a bit.
Mm.
And I believe that having this influx of people who are not only going to sort of vote for liberty, but advocate for it, right? Get out there and do the work. The problem was not that there were not enough people to vote for liberty. The problem was that we didn't have enough people on the ground willing to do the work when the authoritarians did, right? So that's a misnomer that bothers me a lot.
So sorry.
No, it's okay.
Oh my goodness.
That's okay. No worries. What do you think that we can do about this? What I consider to be a mixed message of intent.
Yeah, I mean, when you were explaining that, I was thinking about the internet meme where it says libertarians want to take over your life and then leave you alone, right? And I do think there is truth in that. You know, the rumors and the stories about free staters are probably as wild and as across the spectrum as free staters themselves, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, we need to start with what is a free stater.
Correct.
So at its very basest, a free stater is literally an individual. And then from there, right, it is a philosophy of individualism, right? It is actually true minority rights down to the last man standing or woman in our case, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when people say free staters are, I'm like, you mean a specific person or maybe a subset, but let's talk about that, right? Because what does it mean? If someone says Carla is this kind of free stater, but this person's that kind of free stater, right? So, like everything else, it's like, who is the person and what are they trying to achieve? So, we've had a lot of free staters that have been elected. We've had a lot of free staters who work more in civic leadership, like on the west side of Manchester, where I live. You know, my husband serves on all the parks. We keep the parks clean. We do litter pickups. So, you know, there's the political side, but there's the community side. There are people doing different things from, you know, ice skating. The match between the GOP and the LP is this Saturday. So it really, to me, is kind of meaningless when people collectivize free staters because it's almost against our philosophy. But they also do it in a way that's fascinating because it's a different kind of thing than with Republicans or Democrats. You know, it's like it's they take the words.
You are Republican and Democrat and undeclared free staters.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And exactly. And so it isn't even, you know, really LP as in Libertarian Party.
Right.
It is small L libertarian. And I've always used the term liberty lover. I'm more like a Ron Paulian, really.
Yeah, same.
Because, you know, libertarian as a brand is kind of tainted too. So, you know, there are always issues when you're talking about groups of people, right?
That is absolutely true. It is very difficult. And I like to say, especially politically, right? Let's say you're lining up politicians. You know, Democrats they're very hive mentality, typically how they would vote together. Republicans are like herding cats. And libertarians are like herding cats on meth. Because you can line up a group. I would venture to say if we lined up, 50 people who have moved here with the Free State Project, you will get 50 different policy positions. They all have a slightly different idea about how to achieve the same goals, which is that we all want to live in a more free, decentralized society together. But there are all sorts of radically different ways of going about that. And so I do think in New Hampshire specifically, the left in particular, like the New Hampshire Democrat Party has really tried super, super hard to take this group and apply lots of policy labels to it that just cannot be applied because that's not the point of the Free State Project. Does the Free State Project take any policy position on any subject?
No, free staters do, right? So
Or
participants who've
individuals?
come here, we don't have membership, so there's no base, there's no nothing. I have been doing this for almost 20 years, and I have gotten away with, I can neither confirm nor deny that person is a free stater, because if the CIA can do it, then so can I. and and so there really is, we're a 50, that Free State Project is a 501c3, right? We are an
Mhm.
educational nonprofit. So what
Right.
we as an organization talk about is the benefits of the life you can build here in New Hampshire, right?
Mhm.
You asked earlier about why New Hampshire, and it's not just the low taxes and the beautiful landscape, but it is the quality of living.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made of only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Found in your cartilage, bone, skin, hair, nails, and gut, types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipes, ingredients, and you'll speak to a real person ready to help. Join their private Facebook community to share success stories, recipes, and support each other on this journey called life. Visit getnativepath.com/dailyclout and start your transformation today. That's GETNATIVEPATH.com/DAILYCLOUT.
The school choice you can find here, the little micro um, communities, right? Like big gun community, big hunting, huge food freedom community, like raw milk, you can actually buy it here as if, I don't know, milk should be legal and you could just buy it. But of course, it also does from a policy perspective, from a political perspective, it does have a big legislature. But I actually think that is what has kept New Hampshire uniquely the way it is.
Yes,
And I agree with your assessment that before people started moving, the big wave kind of came in 2008 and then another one in 12. It seems to kind of go a little bit with election cycles, depending on who's mad about what. Um, and then, of course, COVID was, it sounds terrible to say it was really good for liberty, but the honest truth is tyranny and totalitarianism does wake people up at a faster clip than we seem to be
yeah.
able to do otherwise, right?
Yeah, overall, we saw just a massive shift in demographics across the entire country because of COVID. Because it turns out when you lock people in their houses and take away their jobs and everything, they're actually willing to uproot their lives and make big changes if necessary.
Yeah, and what we learned is it does matter where you live, and
Yeah.
that made me incredibly gratified and also maybe a little validated, if I'm being honest, with this concentration strategy, right? And you're right, it's not for everyone, right? It's a huge ask. I have said this over and over again. I was like, look, it's like trying to sell timeshare to a cold place where you're going to have to knuckle down, where you have to be self-resilient and, have perseverance and all of these things. And so it's not the easiest sell. It's not going to appeal to everyone, but we have built a thriving and growing community. And I think there is beauty in that, right? Just kind of like a relaxing when you're like not on edge. You can just be like working towards your authentic self, but also feeling quite safe. There is this dysregulation that we see on social media now where I mean, people are living in very dystopian stories in their minds. And
Yep.
what I love about my life in New Hampshire is I can stop and just go, what is the reality
Mm.
of my life, right? And I'm like, I can walk anywhere in the woods here and be safe. I still carry a gun because I ain't an idiot, right? But you can, right? And
Yeah.
even that is something that is worth preserving. I mean, we actually, patrol sounds strong because I don't even think I've ever used that word. But we don't tolerate people who want to live in tents in the parks that we pay property taxes for.
Right.
And that might sound heartless, but like if I see a dude who just put up a tent on the trail where I'm walking, I'm never rude or mean. I only do it if I'm armed. But I'll just be like, hey, what's your story? And then be like, listen, you can't be here. Tomorrow you need to be gone. And they usually are, right?
Mhm.
But it is that thing of, we have a community where you can go, actually, we're not going to tolerate a decline in the quality of life that's here. And so that idea of reinforcements is, we chose to came here, so we know how important it is to preserve
Yes.
what is here.
Yes. And that is the difference. It's not about radical change. It's about preserving this live free or die spirit that has existed here as far as I can think and know. It goes back. I mean, probably back to its founding. We did actually chase out the British governor by rolling a cannon through his front door to his living room. So I'm just saying.
And I did see Shaheen, I think, did a tweet this week where she accused us of just being smugglers and pirates. And I was like, I think she's trying to insult us, but
We have the right to revolution in our constitution.
yeah,
We actually have
Article
one of the
10.
best state constitutions, I would say, in general. But yes, we have the right to revolution. A lot of people don't realize that.
And honestly, one has to talk about that, right? Because someone like me, and not all free staters are pro-independence, is quite unpopular, but it is kind of one of the things I'm interested in, mostly because I think it opens up a discussion about what is decentralization, what is the consent of the governed. So I did work on introducing a constitutional amendment in 21 and 23. It went close to nowhere. It got like 13 out of 400 votes. There were 13 original colonies. We could probably work with that number and get it up over time. But the important part of that was, hey, let's put questions of what kind of future Granite Staters want in front of Granite Staters, right? Like, we can't control what's happening in California, or if Tennessee floods, or if the Carolinas burn down, or whatever, right? Like, that is so far removed from our reality. And
Mhm.
so again, I think people should really become mindful of, what is my actual physical, in the now, present reality, as opposed to whatever someone's sketching for us, right?
Right.
Except when I'm trying to scare people into moving to New Hampshire, then everything is burning down.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, while I understand the Free State Project is just about trying to entice people who are liberty lovers to move to New Hampshire, to again concentrate power, have strength in numbers, have reinforcements, as I call them, for liberty in New Hampshire. There are other groups that have sort of been spawned as a result of the Free State Project, on more of the political side, to do political advocacy. Talk about some of those groups.
Sure. So the NHLA, which is the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, that was actually started by a Granite Stater partnering with a Free Stater. It's also really old. It doesn't predate the move, but it came around probably in 2003-ish.
Mhm.
That is all volunteers. They do an incredible job. I saw a presentation actually on Saturday by the new director. I don't think it's the political, it might be the research director, the guy in charge of reading the 1,200 bills that was introduced this session. Can we introduce a bill that says, for every bill introduced, 5 have to be scrapped so that if they
No, I am so against that. I am so against that. We have an executive that works 365 days a year. The executive has so much more power in every single state than ever intended. And the only balance to that is the legislature. And in our case, very much a citizen legislature. Most bills that go in are to further liberty. They're actually not in the other direction. I don't want to be handcuffed like that. Every other state, they have all these handcuffs on the amount of bills and everything. And that's how you get legislative leadership and sort of that those swamp creatures who come in and make sure that they can use those tools to block any type of real furthering of liberty. So I have an issue with it from that perspective, but also because I actually think that unless you somehow eliminate the bureaucracies in the administrative state, we need more power given to the legislature and not less.
But they just write so many junky bills. I mean,
Well,
what possibly in the world in New Hampshire demands 1,200 bills?
Most of them are not that junky. And if they are, they get taken care of really fast. I mean, they get in and out real fast. I think people concentrate way too much on the amount. And I do not support anything that would lower the benchmark, because I'm telling you, it's going to be groups like mine that get the shaft if we start putting any type of roadblocks in there. They'd be like, oh, no, you can't put in that bill. You can't. And then.
Oh, no. I meant more. Oh, so you're saying you think it would create gatekeeping in a way where people don't want to put the bills in because they don't want to lose 5 things. Now, I see it differently.
Or they make omnibuses. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Because, I mean, merits to both sides. I do see your point. My point was more that there's so much regulation and legislation and just old stuff out there that I was trying to come up with an incentive structure that would actually incentivize people to get rid of those old bills. Now, of course, Chris Sununu did scrap a lot, and we have talked in the past about doing a project probably driven by some like data free staters to actually use AI to start to go through all the bills, and then you can rank them, anything that is a current law, and we could rank them according to what is freedom, what is just old and, should just be sunset, and then kind of come up and then color code them to be like, okay, here are like the real ones that we actually have to have real conversations about. Because part of the reality is, I don't know, I was playing with the AI this morning and I went down a significant rabbit hole that ended up with like male-female cosmic energy. And people who want to read about it can go to my website, carlagericke.com. But in that, we were talking about how we can use technology better to actually implement improvements, right? Because I do think we're trending towards a technocracy. It's like, oh, we're just going to replace one set of overlords with a new set of overlords. Are they going to be better overlords? But somewhere in that, I'm like, well, we should use tech now to see if we can liberalize, in the true sense of the word, some things before they, robot drones come and murder us all.
No, I would agree. I definitely agree with that. There actually aren't that many bills ever put in a given year that actually create new laws. It's usually amendments to current laws. That's almost every bill for the most part is an amendment to a current law. But I could see, like, if you're going to add a new law, you have to repeal 5.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That. Yeah, I could see it maybe doing something like that. And I do agree with your assessment about AI. I actually have started using it this legislative season more than any other. I'll take, like, let's say a committee. I'm usually in communication kind of behind the scenes with people on committees, and they'll say, oh, we have an amendment to this bill. Sometimes if I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the original, I'm thinking, what's the difference? You know what I mean? I will just upload them both into AI and have them give me an analysis about what the actual differences was. So I'm not like, my eyes are not glazing over something. And I have been coming up with the little nuggets in there like before anybody else, because
Nice.
I think I'm the only one doing it. So yeah, I've been using it a lot more lately, and I think that there could be some, some real advantages. And I always say, the budgets and the all that kind of stuff, we'll just get some autistic libertarians to go in there and just run the numbers. Okay, they can handle this.
I mean, I'm pretty sure some of them are already on the finance committee, but
well, so let's talk about that. Okay, let's talk about the legislature. Yes, New Hampshire has a very unique legislature. Senate is actually kind of more politically typical to most chambers of state legislatures. They have
by which
24
Melissa means corrupt.
Well, there's only 24 of them. And I've talked about this on my show before, and on other shows. 24 senators means that they are in a state of 1.3 million people running campaigns in excess of $100,000, which means that it's very difficult to raise $100,000 without special interest money.
Right.
And so they are very much beholden to special interests. New Hampshire House has a 400-person house for 1.3 million people. The average campaign is about $5,000. Well, you don't need special interest to raise $5,000. You could pretty much just ask your friends and family and raise $5,000. So that lower money threshold, I think, is what has really kept us. First of all, they're not beholden to anybody. When I look at the bills at the beginning of the year in the House and the Senate, looking at the Senate actually makes me angry. Their bills, every single one of them, for the most part, it's either some very easy bipartisan nonsense, and everything else is something for the lobbyists.
Yes.
And in the House, you can look at them and think, these were real ideas. And we tend to be one of the first state to do any new idea. A lot of other states look to the New Hampshire House for original ideas because we have real people in there who are not just running around thinking, how am I going to make my lobbyists who gave me all this money happy? They're really thinking about how are we going to fix problems, right?
Yeah.
How can we really further liberty? And they are really very close to the people, only representing 3,600 people. And they really do represent their constituents. I have a theory, Carla, and you tell me what you think about this. I know you and I both agree that DC is fundamentally broken. There's really no sense in worrying too much about it. They're always talking about drain the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
My theory is you have to flood the swamp.
Flood it with what?
People. I do not think that Congress is representative enough, and I think that that's a huge part of the issue.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that actually has a lot of merit. So in the same way they've talked about for a place like California, where they say, hey, we should have more people because we have more people. I mean, that has merit, because one of the things people, of course, do say about our 400-person state house legislature is that it is difficult to corrupt. It is harder to bribe, in lobbyist terms, because it's all these individuals again, right? Yeah. So yeah, I actually kind of like that idea. It was interesting, because we're first in the nation here in New Hampshire, which is another actual advantage. Now, that is sort of dropped in popularity, but I think New Hampshire is becoming more of a purple state, and I think with some Congress critters retiring, it will be interesting to see. I think there's a real play that's going to happen, and probably get flooded with lots and lots of money. So when Vivek was here, when he was running sort of the stand-in for Trump at the start of the campaign, I actually asked him, or the way I put it to him was, we were talking about how much money he was going to raise. And of course, he was wealthy and, was mostly self-funding, but he needed the 40,000 people with the $5 and whatever the campaign rules are that, no one can remember all of that. And I actually asked him, well, regardless of what the number is in this column, what do you think the number is in the vested interests column in DC? What is the number of the people you are fighting, right? And it is unfathomable. You have to throw probably the whole debt in there, right?
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, although it's so much, we can't actually repay it. I mean, I think that ship has sailed, right?
Well, and I'm with you. I agree. But I think that like, if I were to make the perfect state government here in New Hampshire, if I could just like wave my magic wand, I would double the amount of senators, and then I think we'd be perfect.
Actually, that is a great idea too. Maybe we try and put in a constitutional amendment for that.
Oh, yeah. Think about the senators wanting that. Okay, sure.
Well, actually, one of the great things about New Hampshire is, as you mentioned, is we have a fantastic state constitution. It has great things that are still enshrined in there, like the right of conscience,
Yeah.
which I think we should be talking about a lot more. That's basically your sacred right to say no. And it's like,
You're right.
that is what it means, right? And
Mhm.
so we have this great constitution, but it's also not that difficult to do constitutional amendments here
Yeah.
if you have an idea that the people who are being governed
Yeah.
like. And so in the 15 years I've been working here in politics, we saw the Privacy Constitutional Amendment 2B, which expanded our rights to privacy and actually enshrined it as an inherent right that the
Yes.
government should like not collect our information and leave us alone.
Yeah.
And there was another one that had to do with standing, if I remember correctly. And so we have passed two constitutional amendments. So it's not unfathomable that we
No, it's
could do
definitely
more
not.
senators.
And I maybe I will have somebody put that in, but I really do think more is better. We are a small enough state that you can do more, and they can double up their desks. It's fine.
Right. And we should add, for people who don't know, not only are there so many of them, they also get paid nothing. They get $100 a year, and then the state of New Hampshire generously covers their tolls.
You don't even get free license plates. You still have to pay for your license plate. I remember when I signed up to run the first time, a former representative, which, by the way, because there are 400 here, there's like a joke in New Hampshire that everyone is a state rep, has been a state rep, or will be a state rep.
I mean, it kind of feels that way.
But this former state rep like offered to pay for me. He was like, "Good, I'm glad you're gonna do it. I'll pay for your license plate."
Oh, that's sweet. Well, honestly, one of the ideas I've been kicking around, did you know Jim Forsyth? He was a senator, right? He passed in a like terrible
Yeah.
parasailing
Yeah,
accident, just like a freak accident, right? Young guy my age. There we go, guys. And I remember when he left the Senate, and he was kind of like our first Liberty senator that I knew. He wasn't a free stater, but he was aligned. And he said, I have to leave because I can't actually support my family on $100 a year.
Okay.
And at the time, he said, people were talking about, oh, we should get rid of that. And I was like, no, we should never get rid of that. I do think that's another gatekeeping element, right?
Agreed.
Incentives matter. But I was like, why? What about like a nonprofit that actually, instead of lobbying, you actually like you gift like 2 years of, I don't know, $50,000 salary or something, right? Because we want quality people who have real skills, who could be doing well in the private market, who are raising families, who are doing the things that we want to see emulated.
Yeah.
And it's like, why don't we come up with a hack so we keep the government accountable at the $100 level, but we come up with private solutions so that we can get the quality of people in there that we think is going to preserve and expand the liberties as much as possible.
I love that idea. I had never thought of that. But yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, benefactors, right? Like,
right.
Support a state rep.
Yeah, you have like a patron, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting idea. I really like that. Well, this is the beauty of having folks like you here in New Hampshire now, because we have all these liberty lovers, and we do just sit around and think about how can we make the state better? How can we make our communities better? And I think that is something that's somewhat unique here that just doesn't exist in other places. Like I can just call up some state reps and think and say, you know what, I have this idea and I think that this could solve this solution, this problem. And then we actually just do it.
Right. I mean, it's so mind-boggling to me. I mean, I'm an immigrant who moved to a country, so that means you didn't go to college here. You don't have a network. You don't know anyone when you land, all of those things. And I still get okay, I know I said young earlier, but I'm old enough where I still get the newspaper, like the real newspaper, because I like reading it that way. It keeps me off my device for an extra half an hour in the morning, whatever. And it's crazy because I'm constantly just reading and I'm like, I know that person, I know that person, I know that person, I know that person, right?
Yep.
And it's the network and also the way New Hampshire is, where if you want to be involved, if you want to make a difference, you can. So then the only issue becomes, what are you doing with your own human action? How are you showing up in life? How are you committing your time? What are you doing? What are you thinking? And how are you contributing to making your life the best life you can here?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that's a great place. That's a great little capstone. Tell people how they can find you.
So Free State Project, everyone can find at fsp.org. That stands for Free State Project. We have a monthly calendar. So Free State Project, fsp.org/calendar. If people heard things and they want to come. There are 2 upcoming events for the Free State Project. Liberty Forum is coming up in late April at the Grapponi Center in Concord. Great lineup of speakers. I'm really excited for that. We're trying some new things with like a dialogue series. I'm going to teach a workshop on how defaulting to IQ over EQ is hurting the liberty movement. So I'm sure someone's going to bring eggs to throw. Louis and I, my husband and I, are going to do a talk on what South Africa can teach America, having grown up there and sort of seeing what's happening and sort of trying to put in context also things where it seems like there's this mindset that's like, oh, what's happening is bad now is bad, which of course it is. But then like the default's so apartheid's good. And I'm like, no, apartheid's bad and what's happening is bad
right
now, right? So just trying to sort of clarify things a little bit for people. And then Pork Fest will be in June. So that's 3rd week in June. And those tickets are available to porkfest.com. And then for me personally, everyone can find me at my name, Carla Gericke. It's a weird spelling. So that's Gericke. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Insta. I'm everywhere. I don't hide. And I would love to connect with whoever thinks this sounds great. I am also a real estate agent at Porcupine Real Estate. So people can find me at carla@porcupinerealestate.com.
That's right, folks. She'll help you move here.
I would love to sell you.
In every way, shape, or form to help you move here. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. That is it for the Liberty Lobbyist. I am Melissa Blasek. You can find me on X at Melissa Blasek NH or at Rebuild NH. If you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, you can email me director@rebuildnh.com. Until next time.